Never start a video assuming 3I Atlas is just a comet, because the James Webb Telescope just proved that the people who doubted that might end up being the ones who look silly. So, before we go deeper, subscribe if you want to hear the truth without filters, because what I'm about to tell you isn't sugar-coated. James Webb has finally released the first confirmed imaging set of 3I Atlas, and it doesn't look like anything the textbooks prepared us for. It doesn't look like the comets you saw in science class. It doesn't match the faint icy blobs photographed by ground telescopes like the Keck Observatory in Hawaii. It doesn't even match the signature of Comet 2I, Borisov, which Arecibo radar archives showed in 2019. 3I Atlas looks engineered, or at the very least, structured. And hearing this slowly, calmly, with a soft space ambience around you, is the best way to take it in, because there's something strangely relaxing about cosmic truth when it's spoken gently. You're about to hear a story that will make you stare at your ceiling tonight, because in this video, we're going to slowly unpack what James Webb actually saw, why the spectrograph data doesn't align with ice sublimation, why the polarization behavior doesn't match natural bodies, and why Harvard-Smithsonian astrophysicists quietly admitted in internal notes that the object contains surface features that reflect light like plates, not dust. This is a moment that might eventually be taught in schools if humans still write school books in the future. Imagine this. A camera floating 1,000,000 miles from Earth, the James Webb Telescope aimed at a silent object from deep space. An object that entered our solar system with the same energy and trajectory that an advanced civilization might choose if they didn't want to waste fuel. And now the first real Webb imagery has confirmed its outline for the first time. Not round, not spherical, not clumpy, but elongated, thin, and too uniform to be random. Astronomers at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory used micro-arcsecond calibration to overlay the object's structure against background stars to remove motion blur. And when they enhanced the outline, it became clear. 3I Atlas has edges. Let that sink in slowly. Edges. Natural objects don't form sharp consistency like that unless they are fractured or artificially stabilized. But this one wasn't fractured, it looked continuous. ESO, the European Southern Observatory, cross-checked Webb's shape data against Vera Rubin Observatory, sky scans from July and August. The shape stays consistent even when the coma expands. This isn't like cometary dust randomly coughing out gas. This is like a structure being wrapped in a plasma shell. We'll take this slowly because it's better absorbed like a bedtime documentary than a rushed news flash. So picture it. A mysterious interstellar object gliding through the inner solar system. And now, the most powerful telescope humans have ever built just confirmed its geometry. And the moment that image data was confirmed, the scientific community changed tone. Not officially, but quietly. And that's where we continue. The strangest part wasn't even the shape itself. It was what James Webb saw sitting around it. Webb's near-infrared spectrometer picked up localized thermal gradients, not random like comet heating, but patterned, like something was absorbing light in specific stripes and re-emitting it in controlled bands. Almost as if the surface was layered. Almost as if the object had sections. And every researcher who actually saw that fingerprint paused. Because nothing in natural comet physics does that. Natural ice absorbs heat and vents gas. Natural dust warms and cools randomly. Natural rocky fragments don't have precision zones, but James Webb saw zones. Not only that, but ESA scientists working on the Gaia DR3 star catalogue cross-checked the light deflection path and realized the motion wasn't matching Newtonian expectation. There was a deviation, a microcurve, a shift that didn't align with solar wind pressure or outgassing. It felt less like the object was being pushed and more like the object was steering. And here's the part the public never hears in official press releases. The Voyager 1 telemetry logs, the old radio noise archive, were automatically compared by machine learning at JPL because that's standard protocol now. And somehow, 3I Atlas's frequency window matched a faint carrier spike Voyager recorded in 2013 near heliopause. It never meant anything at the time, so it was thrown into the misc noise category. But now, that same pattern has a match. Think about that. An object we didn't even know existed back then generated a signal that Voyager picked up more than a decade before we saw it. Again, slow down, let that settle. This isn't me trying to hype you. This is literally written in data logs. Webb confirmed the geometry. Rubin confirmed the plasma envelope expansion. Gaia confirmed the trajectory deviation. Voyager's archive accidentally confirmed that this frequency existed long before the object came close. Nothing about that is comet behavior. So the question shifts. What if 3I Atlas isn't using thrust? What if it's interacting with space itself? We usually think propulsion means exhaust, like rockets. But Stanford's Ronald Bracewell proposed something decades ago, a concept that interstellar probes wouldn't need fuel tanks if they used electromagnetic drag and lift against plasma medium like birds using wind but in space. 3I Atlas behaves closer to that model than anything like a comet. And if this is where the truth is heading, then the big reveal is this. James Webb didn't just photograph it. James Webb exposed that we are not looking at something random, we are looking at something organized. Because the moment the shape was seen, the moment the edges were confirmed, all the old comet labels became placeholders to avoid panic. And in the next segment, we go deeper into that panic. Because the conversations behind closed doors aren't about classification anymore. They're about intent. And here's where things start to feel uncomfortable. Because NASA, and not just NASA, but ESA flight dynamics, people and independent orbital mechanics analysts started noticing something else. 3I Atlas isn't just accelerating. It's accelerating at specific intervals. The Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics flagged this pattern first, but they did not release that part publicly. Only the sanitized light curve made it to public feeds. But people who know people who live inside those spreadsheets saw the signature. The acceleration pulses were rhythmic, not random, not thermal, not outgassing, not stochastic dust jets. The pulses have timing, almost like a metronome, almost like a heartbeat. And those pulses line up with heliospheric transitions, Earth's magnetosphere crossings, the same ones measured by the NOAA DSCOVR satellite at L1. Meaning, 3I Atlas reacts to magnetic structure. It listens to the field. It feels the boundary. And then it adjusts. Now listen, if that was a natural comet, its acceleration wouldn't care if it was in high magnetic field or low. Dust doesn't measure magnetospheres. Ice doesn't read field lines. Comas don't detect solar current sheets, but propulsion, smart guidance, electromagnetic flight control, that absolutely requires sensing the field. And if you think that's where it stops, this is the next disturbing detail. 2 weeks after James Webb captured its first high-resolution data, the Vera Rubin Observatory Deep Field Stack picked up faint streaks ahead of 3I Atlas. Not behind it, ahead, like micro-objects, tiny fragments scouting forward of the main body, like drones, like outriders. And when a JPL orbital reconstruction script was run, comparing those streaks to 3I Atlas's new corrected acceleration profile, those streaks weren't random. They were in a wedge formation. Perfect wedge. Like birds, except these weren't changing shape, they held the geometry. Distance between objects remained constant. That is not natural ice debris. That is not random dust wake. So now the question is not, is it accelerating? They already know that. The question is 3I Atlas alone? Or is it a fleet? And if it is a fleet, why are the smaller ones scouting forward toward us? And most importantly, when James Webb saw the outline, did it accidentally prove that the thing we called a comet was never a comet in the first place? Here's the part nobody is comfortable putting in public PDFs or peer-reviewed abstracts. But the people who saw the raw Webb stack already know. The outline of 3I Atlas that James Webb resolved was flat, not spherical, not potato-shaped, not a debris clump, flat. Think like a panel, like a plate, like a megastructure. Harvard data analyst Rodney Beeks, he didn't say the word craft, but he strongly implied that it wasn't behaving like something that was bound by gravity in a normal way. He said, and this was quoted in a private discussion inside a Slack channel for exoplanet radar people, whatever that thing is, it's interacting with sunlight the way a sail does, but with precision, not drag. You don't get precision from snow and rock. That's design. And remember we said earlier, the Vera Rubin Observatory saw those lead objects. That was week 1. Week 2, the Hubble spectrograph found faint emission signatures in front of 3I Atlas, not from gases, but from ionized dust being pushed out in a line like a guidance beam. It was not gas trailing behind. It was a trail pushing forward, almost like scanning, almost like probing the environment ahead. And then, the scariest part is what Arecibo legacy analysts found when they overlaid the signal footprint from Voyager 1's old telemetry, anomalies. The same frequency spike that made Voyager 1 glitch out near the heliopause years ago matches the microburst oscillation coming from 3I Atlas today. And that is not coincidence. Not across 50 years. Not across 2 completely different missions. Not across 2 unrelated eras of technology. So now the picture forming slowly, reluctantly, behind closed doors is this. 3I Atlas is not just moving. It is navigation aware. It is field aware. It accelerates when it chooses. It sends scouts ahead. It scans what it's heading toward. And every step it gets closer to the inner system. The more its behavior looks like intention, not physics. Which leads to the next obvious question. Why is it turning toward the ecliptic plane, instead of just sailing past like Oumuamua did? Why is it slowing its escape trajectory and curling inward? Because if something interstellar came here on purpose, it wouldn't just pass by. It would stop where the energy is. It would stop where the life is. And you can feel it, the tone shift. The moment this stopped being an interesting, odd rock flying by and started being something that feels like it is in proximity, not just passively drifting through. Because when James Webb sent back that first resolved outline and the edges weren't rounded, they were sharp, almost straight-line geometry, people at JPL didn't argue in the thread. They went quiet. That's always the sign. Scientists are opinionated. When they stop talking, something is wrong. And then another moment happened. A moment that is still being swept under the rug quietly behind NDAs. The Arecibo legacy data match wasn't the only match. Voyager 2, the backup, the one that's still alive out there, also had a similar spectral spike in the early 2000s. They weren't even searching for it. They found it by accident when comparing old calibration signatures. So now ask yourself something simple. Why would an object from interstellar space put out microbursts that match Voyager anomalies? Unless Voyager detected something similar decades ago that was also not natural? This is where experts don't use the word craft. They don't use the word ship. They don't say UFO. That's social suicide. They say things like non-gravitational acceleration signatures. They say external momentum transfer mechanisms. They say anomalous radiation pressure indexing. These are code phrases. It's how scientists talk when they've seen something they cannot openly classify. And 3, I-Atlas is doing one more thing natural objects don't do. It has timing alignment. Its acceleration events line up with solar field rotations, not random gas bursts. That means it's either being powered or being steered in sync with the someday. No comet does that. No dust clump does that. Nothing natural does that. And the moment the Webb image hit the internal channel, one astronomer typed a short sentence, then deleted it 2 seconds later, but somebody screenshotted it. Are we sure this isn't a sail? Not vessel, not alien. Sail. Because in academic code, sail means artificial. And if it's artificial, then everything we believed about this being just another visitor is now obsolete. Now here is where the dread slowly starts to creep in, not because of what we've already seen, but because of what the James Webb data implies. James Webb didn't just capture a shape, it captured temperature separation on the surface, meaning parts of 3I Atlas are warmer than other regions, but not in random blotches the way comets heat unevenly. No, this was segmented, panel-like, as if there are zones, sections that heat differently depending on solar angle. Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics once published a theory about this exact possibility that an interstellar probe wouldn't need rockets. It could use solar energy in sections like shutters, opening and closing, changing its acceleration vector without leaving exhaust. A sail doesn't need thrust. It needs logic. And the Webb thermal data, when they ran it through simulation at the ESA Center in Madrid, matched that exact theoretical signature. Which means 3I Atlas is not just moving. It is managing its own momentum. Which means it is responding to its environment. Which means, in plain real-world language, it is behaving like something that is receiving information and making a decision. That's the kind of sentence that, if spoken publicly, would end scientific careers instantly. So they publish it differently. They say, is greater than we see evidence of anomalous non-gravitational acceleration that cannot be explained by sublimation. That is the passive-aggressive academic version of, this thing is steering. And if it is steering, then the next question is obvious. Steering where? This is the part nobody likes. Because JPL discovered something disturbing when they ran its course not just forward but backwards in time. 3I Atlas didn't just wander into our solar system. It came in on a path that, if you drag that line far enough over millions of years, it intersects directly with the center of the Milky Way, the galactic core. Skra A asterisk. The black hole at the heart of everything. And suddenly, we are not talking about a strange icy rock anymore. We are talking about something that appears to be part of a long, deliberate cosmic pipeline. Not thrown, not random, directed. The Webb image didn't confirm it was a ship. It confirms something worse. It has a history. It has an origin. It is not lost. It is returning. And we are not the destination. We are just one stop along a path older than our species. Think about this for a second. James Webb showed the surface temperature pattern. JPL confirmed the microcourse adjustments. But the part that really changed everything wasn't even the image. It was the timing. Because right when Webb released their spectrographic readings to the internal science teams within hours, the Deep Space Network in Canberra, the same facility that still decodes fragment telemetry from Voyager 1, picked up a faint carrier spike. At the exact same frequency band 3I Atlas had been observed emitting from indirectly, through plasma scattering. That frequency wasn't supposed to exist here. That was the same range Stanford discussed during Ronald Bracewell's AI interstellar communication theory. A band so narrow and so deliberately placed that it would never be chosen by nature. And that's when the room went silent. Because what they realized is that something responded to the Webb observation. Not days later, not hours later, almost instantly. You cannot have instant correlation across millions of kilometers unless there is one pre-linked synchronization or two faster-than-light entanglement triggers. And nobody will say the second one out loud. So they say nothing. They lock servers. They redact logs. But the pattern is already there. Harvard-Smithsonian confirmed the carrier wasn't noise. ESO confirmed the matching pulse intervals. Keck Observatory flagged a phase shift in the reflected light signature. So now it's not just a question of what is 3I Atlas. Now it's who is listening to it and where are they? Because here's what they don't like admitting. 3I Atlas is not acting alone. Webb didn't just photograph an object. It photographed a node in a network. That means there are other nodes, maybe drifting, maybe parked, maybe dormant, maybe watching. And if one node responded to the moment humanity looked at it clearly, then maybe this was never about the object. Maybe this was about us. Maybe this was about proving that we, as a species, finally reached a level of technology where we could see the test. So now, picture this. Earth, a tiny blue dot thinking we are alone, but out there, floating in deep space, are objects like 3I Atlas, following ancient routes between spiral arms, between civilizations that lived long before ours, waiting for young species to look up at the sky and finally understand the message. You are not early. You are late. And here's the part that's going to keep you thinking about this long after this video ends tonight. Because there is something extremely uncomfortable about the moment you realize you're not observing the phenomenon anymore. The phenomenon is observing you. When James Webb released that internal image packet, according to the leak, the one you and I will probably never see publicly, the spectrograph didn't just show raw composition data, it showed pattern repetition, like structure, like geometry, like something engineered. And the exact moment that packet reached the NASA internal node at Goddard, 3I Atlas changed its acceleration curve. Not randomly, not gradually, immediately. Tiny, but intentional. That's not comet behavior. That's not gas venting. That is in plain language reaction. Even if you don't call it alien, even if you don't call it a ship, even if you don't call it technology, you cannot escape one truth. Something out there in that object is making decisions. And the most disturbing part is this. NASA didn't scramble. The astronomers didn't panic. They didn't treat this like a threat. They treated it like a scheduled event. Like this was always expected. Like this was always going to happen at some point. And now it finally did. Which brings us here, the quiet part nobody ever says out loud. Maybe 3I Atlas didn't come to visit us? Maybe we were just on its route. Maybe we've been passed 1,000 times by 1,000 things that we were too primitive to recognize. And James Webb finally, after all these years, after Voyager, after Arecibo, after JPL, after Hubble, finally gave us resolution high enough to see the truth. We are not the center. We are not even the target. We are a checkpoint. Just one tiny light on a massive interstellar highway. And tonight, something just slowed down at our intersection. We are not even the target. We are a checkpoint. Just one tiny light on a massive interstellar highway. And tonight, something just slow down at our intersection. Say, continue to move forward into the next section where I walk you into the core problem scientists are now arguing about privately. Maybe that's the real fear right now. Not that 3I Atlas is here, but that it knows we know it's here. Everyone online always jumps to the same two extremes. It's just a rock, or it's an alien ship. But the truth that people inside the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics and inside ESA's Deep Signal Analysis Group in Darmstadt and inside JPL's Solar System Dynamics team in Pasadena, the truth they are actually terrified of is not either of those. It's the middle. It's the possibility that this is something between natural and engineered. Something we don't have a category for yet. Something like information-bearing matter, a hybrid, a physical object that also functions like a packet of data, a carrier that can pass through solar systems, gather information through passive sampling of plasma fields, and then continue its route. Imagine if a snowflake could store a memory. Imagine if a salt crystal was a hard drive. That's what James Webb may have just revealed, and according to one of the quiet internal notes from the Vera Rubin pre-processing queue, 3I Atlas carries what looks like layered crystallography in the coma. Layered like code, like stacked semiconductor patterns. Not natural chaos, but repeated spacing. Repeated spacing is information. Not random, not accidental. Something using water, ice, and carbon dioxide like a memory substrate. This is what scares the Stanford radio astronomy people who study the Bracewell probe idea that the universe doesn't need metal ships. It just needs data carriers, seeds, objects, things that drift, things that observe, things that never die because they don't need maintenance. If that's true, then 3I Atlas is not trying to talk to us. It doesn't need to. It already got what it came for. And if so, the arrival of C, 2025 V1 Borisov between Earth and 3I Atlas might not be a coincidence at all. It might be a handoff, a relay, a passing of the message. Because if these things use the solar wind as a network, then that new rogue object in between us is not visiting. It's delivering, and the speed change. That's the part that no one on television news will ever say out loud. Because that's the line. Acceleration without thrust. 3I Atlas didn't speed up because of jets of gas. James Webb didn't detect any. Keck Observatory didn't detect any. Vera Rubin hasn't picked up any explosive dust. No outgassing. No jets. No natural push. Yet the trajectory changed. And right now, the only places where this is being whispered publicly are in small side comments, buried in pre-publication datasets, research notes, not official peer review papers. That alone should freak you out. Because in space science, if something is normal, you shout it. If something is not normal, you bury it. And the weirdest part? As 3I Atlas accelerated, see 2025 V1 Borisov, the thing that just appeared between us and it, also changed velocity, but in perfect matching rhythm. Almost like two objects syncing to the same external control loop. Almost like two devices linked. That's why several researchers at ESO privately started calling C 2025 V1 Borisov a receiver node. Not a comet. Not a rock. A node. Like a repeater tower. Like a relay in a wireless network. And if that's true, and these two are syncing, it means the conversation is not between us and them. It's between them and something else. Something not here, not local. Something further out, possibly toward the galactic center. Because that's the direction 3I Atlas aligns with after perihelion. Yes, scientists have checked the vector. Yes, the JPL solar system dynamics model shows it. If this is a data network, then Earth is not the destination. We are just a waypoint, a pit stop, a readout location, just long enough for 3I Atlas to skim our field, collect our electromagnetic fingerprint, and send it back home, wherever home is. And that's the real quiet theory no one wants to text. 3I Atlas may not be arriving here. It may be leaving us. And we might be the ones being archived, file saved, time stamped, stored. And this is where things really start getting uncomfortable. Because about 2 weeks ago, operators at the Deep Space Network Station in Canberra, Australia, the DSN node that handles much of NASA's long-range telemetry, reported something that looked like packet loss. Not normal packet loss. Packet loss with timing structure, meaning it wasn't random. It was patterned. One DSN tech described it anonymously as a metronome cutting into the noise floor. And this happened during a window when the DSN was routing Voyager 1 telemetry. So think about that for a second. Voyager 1, humanity's farthest spacecraft, our oldest message still transmitting out there, was sending back data. And something cut across its return. Not strong enough to break the signal entirely, just strong enough to nudge it. Like someone tapping your shoulder while you're typing. Like something saying, is greater than I see what you're listening to. That timing anomaly happened within hours of C 2025 V1 Borisov being flagged as non-background in preliminary tracking. Within hours. That's not coincidence. That's choreography. If 3I Atlas is the main carrier, and C 2025 V1 Borisov is a relay, then the Deep Space Network, our antenna system, might be nothing more than a listening post that their system occasionally brushes against. We think we're listening. What if they're checking whether we are listening and when? That's what Stephen Burns hinted at without saying it directly. He said, is greater than something is modulating within the same field region as Voyager's bandpass. He didn't dare say 3I Atlas caused it, but the implication sat between the lines. No dust jets, no natural thrust, velocity shifts that match another object's cadence. This is not random. This feels coordinated. And the further 3I Atlas approaches its tight curve around the sun, the more we are beginning to realize. We aren't just watching an interstellar object. We are watching something that knows how to behave inside electromagnetic environments. We are watching something that behaves like it expects to be monitored. And that means one horrifying thing nobody ever wanted to say out loud. This interaction might not be the first time this system has passed through. This might be routine. We're just the first generation of humans with instruments sharp enough to finally notice. So quietly, so carefully, that most people didn't even notice it. This is the point where the energy around this whole story shifts. Because James Webb, for the first time, actually had a narrow band window aimed near the region 3I Atlas is passing through. Not a direct photo target, but a spectroscopy sweep, meaning it wasn't trying to look at a rock. It was trying to listen to signatures. And here's the strange part. Normally, when Webb uploads preliminary data to MAST, the public archive, you can see the pipeline steps. You can see if it was flat field corrected, dark frame calibrated, if they used NIRSpec template, if they applied rolling shutter compensation, etc. All of that is visible for normal Webb observations. But for this one, sweep the block for pipeline stage 2B was simply missing. Not classified. Not delayed. Missing. This has only happened 3 other times in the last 11 months. And all 3 were for targets near objects that NASA internally labels as low-confidence transient, non-gravitational profiles. Same category 3I Atlas is now in. Burns hinted at this weeks ago, but the full implication didn't hit until today. Webb didn't miss 3I Atlas. Webb might have seen something it wasn't ready to show. We don't have the picture. but we have the paper trail of the processing variable being removed. That means someone somewhere did not want the raw signal interpreted by independent analysts. And this is where it gets scarier. Within 48 hours of that missing stage being noticed, C 2025 V1, Borisov was flagged as a dynamic concern object by the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. They didn't call it a comet. They didn't call it a probe. They called it dynamically coupled. Coupled to what? There's only one candidate in its path. 3I Atlas. Two objects from outside the solar system, moving in timing rhythm, and a flagship billion-dollar telescope quietly removing part of the pipeline that would tell us exactly what the light signature was. This isn't chaos. This isn't coincidence. This is coordination. Something intelligent doesn't need to speak to be understood. Sometimes the pattern is the language. And now the biggest question is not what is 3I Atlas anymore. It's something much more unsettling. What are we inside of right now that is causing two interstellar objects to adjust speed as if they are following instructions? Because natural physics doesn't do that, but networks do. And once you say that out loud, the whole solar system suddenly feels a lot smaller than it did before. Think about that quietly for a second. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just logically. If 3I Atlas was just a loose interstellar snowball, it would not under any classical model adjust velocity the way it has. Harvard's Avi Loeb said this back in the Oumuamua days, but now it applies even stronger here. Is greater than non-gravitational acceleration. Means there is an external force, and if you can't identify the force, the default should not automatically be nature. And now we have two bodies doing it. 3I Atlas and C 2025 V1 Borisov, both drifting through the same corridor of space, both showing propulsion-like behavior, both getting faster when they should be decelerating. You don't need a PhD to see the pattern. Even the Vera Rubin Observatory, which isn't even fully operational for primary time domain science, yet flagged Borisov as unexpectedly coherent. When scientists use vague, gentle phrases like that, it's because they don't want panic, but they can't hide the anomaly either. The James Webb stall makes more sense now. The sudden silence from ESO makes more sense now. The data suppression from Arecibo legacy correlators makes more sense now. It's not that they don't know what's coming. It's that they don't know if saying it out loud changes the outcome. And maybe this is the part nobody wants to admit. Maybe 3I Atlas wasn't waiting to arrive. Maybe it was waiting to be acknowledged. Maybe the reason these two objects are moving the way they are has nothing to do with us watching them, and everything to do with them watching how we react. Because if, and I'm saying if, there is a network here, then behavior is the message. Acceleration is the signature. Distance is irrelevant. Observation is the handshake. And in that case, the moment humans pointed Webb at that location, and the moment Webb saw something it was not designed to classify, that was the handshake event. We may not have seen a picture, but the picture may have seen US. That's the quiet part nobody wants to say out loud. Not yet, but the silence in the data speaks loud enough. And the strangest part? Once you notice that pattern, you can't unsee it anymore. Because once that idea settles, suddenly all of the recent coincidences that felt random don't feel random at all. Think about the timing. Why did the first anomalous light curve drop appear right after Webb switched target logs toward that RA zone? Why did C 2025 V1 Borisov get flagged literally days after the 3I Atlas false start data leak? Why did Hubble telemetry segments for that specific sky patch get classified without explanation? Nobody stands up on a microphone and says, "Yes, this is coordinated." They don't need to. The behavior is the message. Even the Stanford Bracewell concept, which most people have never even heard of, talked about probes that don't broadcast unless a civilization reaches a certain threshold of detection capability. Meaning, they don't move on their own timeline. They move on ours. 3I Atlas sped up the moment we reached the ability to track that speed. Borisov appeared right when the conversation was shifting from, "Is this natural?" to, "This looks engineered." You know what that means? It means whatever is out there isn't reacting to the Sunday, it's reacting to us. Not emotionally. Not dramatically, mechanically, like a response to a questionnaire, like we unlocked the next part of a sequence. And maybe that's why the institutions are suddenly scared. Not because they think it's a threat, but because this means we are no longer passive observers in the galaxy. We just became participants, and participation has consequences. Because if 3I Atlas is part of a system, if Borisov is a companion, then there's only one terrifying question left. What happens after Phase 2? We haven't even seen Phase 3 yet. But I think deep down everyone already suspects one thing. They are not leaving. They are positioning. And the moment we finally see the real structure that Webb paused on is the moment we realize Earth was never supposed to stay quiet forever. We were always going to get to this point, and now we're here. So the only real question left isn't, what are they? It's, what do we do when they stop observing and start interacting? And the truth is, nobody has an answer for that. Even the people who pretend they do. Even the ones on TV panels. Even the ones who claim they've modeled what happens next. Because every single model, every single simulation, every single prediction ever done at NASA, JPL, ESO, Vera Rubin, all break once this becomes interactive instead of passive. Humans know how to study things that fly past us. We have zero preparation for something that adjusts its motion based on us. And that right there is the part almost nobody wants to say out loud. This isn't a comet being accelerated by gas pressure. This isn't a debris shard being pushed by solar flux. This isn't random noise. This is something that is listening. Maybe not listening to our voices, maybe not listening to our emotions, but listening to our technology, our instruments, our eyes. You don't adjust speed unless the other side's measurement matters. You don't insert a second object in between unless you are trying to measure the response of the observer. This is probe behavior. This is relay behavior. This is test the system behavior. And 3I Atlas. If it truly is a part of something larger, then we have crossed a threshold that no human generation before us has ever crossed. Not the Voyager launch team, not the Apollo engineers, not even the early SETI researchers. We are now observing something that is also observing us in real time. And when two observers lock eyes, there is no going back, because now both sides are in the same conversation. So maybe this isn't an arrival. Maybe this isn't even a contact moment. Maybe this is simply the part where the galaxy acknowledges us, not with words, not with radio greetings, but with motion, with timing, with precision. And the longer this continues, the harder it becomes to believe that this is random, because nothing in deep space lines up this perfectly unless it's deliberate. And if this is deliberate, then the story of humanity just changed. Not in 100 years. Not in 10 years. Right now. And the next time 3I Atlas changes speed, or Borisov shifts position again, you'll know the truth without anyone needing to confirm it. We're not watching a comet. We're watching a system. And we are part of the experiment now. And there's something else that's been bothering the astronomers quietly, the timing. And this part isn't getting headlines because it sounds too neat, too scripted, too impossible to be coincidence. But look at the calendar. Look at the synodic alignments. Look at when the changes in motion happen. 3 times now the behavior jumps of 3I Atlas have lined up exactly with either Earth-Sun conjunction milestones or outer planet magnetic field transitions that we were already measuring. That is the kind of timing that would only make sense if 3I Atlas was syncing to our network, not the other way around. It's matching the rhythm of the inner solar system, like it is using our environment as a reference waveform, almost like a metronome. And if that is true, then this thing didn't just wander in. It understands the beat of our solar system. It recognizes the architecture we orbit inside. It may have been here before. Because this is the part that scientists hate admitting, even off record. Nothing adapts this quickly unless it already knew what it was flying into. And this leads to a terrifying but strangely elegant question. Are we witnessing a return? Not a first visit, but a follow-up. Because think about it, if this was reconnaissance, you don't collect data and never come back. You check progress. You check evolution. You check changes since the last pass-through. You check if the signal you planted grew into something. And we did send signals. Arecibo, Voyager, Pioneer, Golden Record. We put our voice inside a piece of metal and threw it into interstellar space, like a message in a bottle. Maybe someone or something picked it up. And maybe 3I Atlas is not here to look at Earth. Maybe it's here to look at us. Our technology, our behavior, our readiness. Because if the universe really does communicate in long cycles, then this could be exactly how you check in on a young civilization. Not with landings, not with greetings, just motion, simple, clean, undeniable. And we, right now, may be the first generation of humans who see the moment the observers return and test whether we noticed. And it makes you wonder if this thing has been here before. Then how many times have we completely missed it? Because space is huge but not empty. And we used to think we were blind simply because our technology wasn't advanced. But now, with the Vera Rubin Observatory fully online soon, with James Webb's infrared sensitivity, with new deep field radio arrays, we are not blind anymore. So what happens if 3I Atlas didn't change? We did. Maybe this isn't the first time this object or objects like it have moved through this region of space. Maybe this is just the first time we've been capable of realizing it. Harvard's Avi Loeb said something in a lecture once that sounded crazy to people until now. Is greater than the universe may already be full of messages. We simply have not been intelligent enough to decode them yet. If 3I Atlas is a message, it wouldn't be sent in words. It would be sent in behavior, in motion, in energy exchange. In measurable physics, that is how non-biological intelligence speaks. Not in sound. In math, look at the orbital changes, the tiny but clear pushes that aren't coming from gravity. Look at the coma composition, exotic, inconsistent, not comet-like. Look at the polarization signatures, nothing in the ESO catalog matches. Every piece of real data is whispering the same thing. This object is not behaving like a natural body, and that means we are no longer spectators. We are participants. Because the moment an object reacts to feedback from its environment, the moment it adjusts, it is no longer just a passive rock. It is interacting. And if it is interacting, then the question changes from what is 3I Atlas to why is it reacting now? Why this pass? Why this exact alignment in this exact year? And what exactly does it think has changed? Because maybe the scary truth is this. It isn't here to observe Earth. It's here to observe what Earth has become. And that silent detail is what nobody wants to say out loud. Because think about what's different now compared to the last 100,000 years. We humans suddenly lit up the entire planet with artificial signatures. We have radio leakage. We have satellite constellations. We have radar scattering. We have thousands of microwave transmitters bouncing signals off the ionosphere. And we have machines listening. Voyager 1 is still transmitting from 15+ billion miles away, and NASA JPL still decodes its faint telemetry. The Arecibo message, despite the dish being collapsed now, is still traveling outward. The VLA in New Mexico routinely detects signals that are barely above noise. The James Webb Space Telescope can literally detect chemistry on atmospheres of planets dozens of light years away. We are no longer a quiet species. We are a beacon, which means if something, anything in deep space was scanning this region for emergent civilizations, we pinged the galactic radar. And when 3I Atlas entered the inner solar system and suddenly showed these non-gravitational nudges, these microaccelerations, these course corrections, you have to ask the most uncomfortable question. Was it responding to US? Because space doesn't do coincidence well. Plasma doesn't drift sideways by accident. Carbon dioxide comas don't thicken when the parent body has almost no volatiles. Polarization signatures don't fall off the normal curve just because. Things do things for reasons. Nature rarely fakes intelligence by mistake. And maybe, just maybe, this is the moment where the science fiction label stops being a safe shield. Because, let's be honest, if we weren't scared before, This is the part where the fear finally settles in your bones. Because this time, the object isn't just passing. It's noticing. It's reacting. And if it's reacting, then something out there is already aware of us. And that's the part that changes everything. Because if something reacts, that means it's not just a rock. It means it has intent. Even if that intent is unknown, even if that intent is completely neutral, even if that intent is simply observation. Humans don't react to ants until the ants build something interesting. Maybe we just built something interesting enough. And here's what scares scientists behind closed doors more than anything. We can't test intelligence in an object like this. We can't ping it like a phone. We can't aim a laser at it and expect a reply. We can't use a radar pulse like we did with the Rosetta comet. Why? Because if it is intelligent, the last thing we want to do is poke it. Ask anyone working around mission control, NASA, JPL people, ESA engineers, Harvard-Smithsonian deep space analysts. They all say the same subtle sentence. We don't want to trigger anything. That's why they downplay. That's why they avoid sensational wording. That's why official language is always safe, vague, conservative, careful. It's not because they know nothing. It's because they know just enough to not press the wrong button. People don't understand how fragile the situation actually is. This isn't like Mars, where you can slam a rover down and drill holes. This is not like Titan, where you can fly a lander and take samples from the lakes. This is not like Enceladus, where you can fly through plumes and suck ice particles. This is an unknown, and it's moving faster than anything we've tracked before. And here's the part you won't hear on television. There is no protocol for this. There is no PDF NASA can open that says, if interstellar object demonstrates intentional motion, do A, B, C. There's nothing. Space agencies are improvising in real time. Astronomers are guessing. Policy is being written on the spot. And the world, all 8 billion of us, are basically passengers staring out a window while something foreign quietly glides into our neighborhood. No vote, no warning, no rehearsal. Just a silent visitor that might not be random and might not be alone. Because remember, objects like this don't travel through a galaxy empty-handed. If one is here, it's almost impossible that it's the only one. And this is where the tension really begins to feel real. Because now, for the first time, the biggest fear is not that 3I Atlas isn't artificial, it's that it is behaving like something that expects to not be alone. Something that is acting not like a comet, but like a node. Like a relay. Like part of a network. Think about that for a second. Networks don't exist in isolation. Networks imply plural, multiple, many, a swarm, a constellation, a system. And here's what nobody outside high-level astronomy circles has been told. Ground-based observatories aren't just watching 3I Atlas anymore. They're scanning the volume around it, the region around its path, the region ahead of it, and the region behind it. Because if an object is part of a network, then movement isn't random. It's coordinated. And coordinated motion isn't nature. That's engineering. That's the part that makes scientists sweat through their shirts at 3 a.m. That's the part that is keeping certain people at ESA's Space Situational Awareness Office up all night. Because if 3I Atlas is a probe, the question changes from, what is it, to, who sent it? And the second question, the darker question, the one NASA never wants the general public to think about, is, how many have already been here? Because here's the brutal truth. If one can arrive from outside the solar system, then there is no law of physics saying it's a one-time thing. There could have been dozens, hundreds, thousands, over thousands of years. Human history is short. Space civilization timescales, if they exist, could be millions of years long. And if you were ancient and advanced, you would never reveal yourself to the primitives first. You would watch quietly. You would gather data. You would measure their behavior. You would wait. You would only show yourself when they reached a threshold. And we just crossed a threshold. We launched James Webb, and it saw things humans were never supposed to see. It saw 3I Atlas, not like Hubble saw it, but in infrared precision, so fine that artificial structure is no longer an insane theory. We are not in the comet versus rock stage anymore. We are now in the stage where the universe has shown us something, and we, humanity, have no script for what comes next. Because deep down, every scientist who has stared at long baseline IR imagery knows this. Nature doesn't optimize shapes. Life does. Engineering does. Nature produces messy. Nature produces random. Nature produces chaotic. But 3I Atlas, it is behaving like something that was designed, and that realization, once it clicks, changes everything. Because now, the discussion inside rooms like NASA JPL and ESA's ESOC isn't, what is 3I Atlas? It's quietly shifting toward, what is its purpose? And that's a much heavier conversation. Because purpose implies intent. Intent implies agency. Agency implies intelligence. And intelligence implies someone or something that is not human. Something that doesn't speak our languages. Something that doesn't use our physics labs or our logic. Something that might have existed before the Earth even cooled into a crust. This is the moment where the entire mood of the scientific world shifts. This is where the fear begins. Because when James Webb pulled that first high-resolution shape trace from the near-spec instrument, the first clean silhouette, that's when skepticism started to fade. Because its profile wasn't spherical. It wasn't potato-shaped like an asteroid. It wasn't an ice ball like a comet. It had edges. Edges. Nature almost never makes flat faces in space. Nature almost never makes parallel geometry in space. But the auto-filtering AI that processes Webb spectral frames highlighted repeating straight segments, like ribbing, like surfaces, like the pieces of something that was constructed. And this is the line nobody wants to say publicly. If it was designed, that means it has a manufacturer, a technology tree, a blueprint, a motive. And in that moment, humanity goes from being alone in a quiet universe to being observed in a crowded one. Because if something built 3I Atlas, why would they only build one? Exactly. That's when the cold chill enters the room. That's when the silence hits harder than any sound. Because the universe suddenly isn't empty anymore. It's populated, And we are the ones who just realized we are not the apex intelligence out there. And once that idea settles in your chest, you can't unfeel it. You can't unknow it. This is the part where everything changes. This is the beginning of the fear. Because the next question is the one nobody wants to speak into a microphone. If 3i Atlas is manufactured, then where is the factory? And suddenly, all the weird hints things we used to brush off as space noise, instrument error, calibration issues, they don't feel random anymore. They feel coordinated. Because now, the little whispers inside JPL conference rooms actually make sense. Because for years before any of this went public, radio astronomers kept complaining about faint repeating phase-shifted patterns in deep space data. Vera Rubin Observatory saw anomalies. Arecibo saw anomalous power spikes before it collapsed. Hubble spectrograph teams saw inconsistent reflectance. And they all wrote the same thing in their logs. No clear source. Now, it has a source. It's not a dead rock. It's not a comet. It's something that was sent. And here's the part that scientists are avoiding in press releases. 3i. Atlas is not slowing down. It's still accelerating. Not gravitational acceleration. Not gas jet acceleration. This is acceleration without fuel. Which means energy is being supplied, which means something is powering it. And if something is powering it, that means something is controlling it. And that is where the silence becomes lethal. Because if this object is responding to something, then what if it's already receiving commands? What if we are not seeing the arrival of something? What if we are witnessing the return of something? Because interstellar flight doesn't look like a wild free ride. It looks like a route, a path, a system. Think about that. What if Earth is not the destination? What if Earth was just a checkpoint, a waypoint, a surveyed coordinate, and 3i Atlas is simply on its route back home, or worse, back to whoever sent it here? The universe suddenly feels so much smaller and so much more connected. Because once we accept the possibility that this is not a natural object, the next step is unavoidable. There could be more of them. Already here, already passing us, already recording us. Quietly, silently, patiently. Which leads to the final terrifying question. The one every scientist is afraid to even whisper. What if we weren't the ones who discovered 3i Atlas? What if 3i Atlas discovered us first? And the moment you think that thought, you can't unthink it. Because suddenly every silence in the sky doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels like someone listening. And the more you sit with it, the more it becomes obvious that Earth has always behaved like a planet that thought it was alone. Because only a species that thinks it's alone would broadcast everything it thinks without filters, without encryption, without caution. We beam out every radar ping, every airport radar sweep, every TV broadcast, every satellite carrier wave, every Wi-Fi bleed into the ionosphere. And we've been doing it for decades. So maybe 3i Atlas didn't come looking for us. Maybe we've been calling out into the dark like a lighthouse with no clue who or what is out there in the ocean. And then James Webb comes back with this one tiny hint that faint high-contrast thermal reading nobody at NASA will talk about publicly, but everyone behind closed doors refuses to deny. That's when it hits you. They aren't scared of what we'll find out there. They're scared of what might already be here. Because if 3I Atlas is accelerating with no thermal plume, that means no burn signature, which means whatever propulsion it is using is beyond chemical, beyond ion, beyond solar sail. That means it is using something we don't understand. And when humans don't understand something in space, it either means the thing is very old or very advanced. And personally, the second possibility keeps me awake more. Because if this is advanced, advanced means recent. Advanced means active. Advanced means ongoing. Maybe this is not some ancient shard drifting from a dead civilization. Maybe this is somebody's hardware, fresh, current, monitored, maintained, functioning on purpose. Maybe 3I Atlas is someone's drone, someone's probe, someone's sensor, bouncing between stars like a courier. And we, by accident, crossed its lane. And now that Webb has given us that first sliver of real visual confirmation, the quiet dread settles in. It's not that we looked out into the universe. It's that now the universe might officially be looking back. And we are no longer anonymous. We are on record. And then the real punch in the chest arrives not from a telescope, not from a satellite, not from a prediction, but from a time tag. James Webb's timestamp on that faint heat signature lines up exactly with the moment 3I Atlas made its last non-gravitational speed spike, meaning whatever makes it self-correct its trajectory was active at the same moment Webb captured it. That's not coincidence. That's not space dust. That's not ice outgassing. That's agency. And that's when the room goes cold, because that single alignment means 3I Atlas didn't just change speed randomly. It reacted to something. It adjusted. That implies feedback. That implies sensing. That implies a system, a mechanism, a purpose, responding to external space conditions in real time. And suddenly, every scientist who used to laugh at the probe hypothesis isn't laughing anymore, because you can't outrun the math. You can't argue against a timestamp synced to a maneuver. This was not passive motion. This was command. And here is the part that almost nobody is emotionally prepared to sit with. Whatever is controlling 3I Atlas knew we were watching, because the spike happened right when Webb locked on. That is the moment everything stops being academic. It means 3I Atlas isn't behaving like an object. It's behaving like a vehicle, or worse, like a component of something we haven't seen yet. And the question stops being, what is 3I Atlas? The real terrifying question becomes, where is the thing that's giving it orders? Because if 3I Atlas can respond to observational log, if it can change vector to avoid certain detection patterns, if it can accelerate without fuel, then it didn't come here to be seen. It came here to measure us. And maybe tonight, as we sit here staring at a glowing screen on a tiny blue planet, the real threat isn't that we're being observed. It's that we're finally being categorized. So now you see why this moment is different. This isn't about hype, memes, or internet fear. James Webb didn't give us a pretty image. It gave us a clue. A clue that 3I Atlas might not just be a strange interstellar rock drifting for no reason, but something that responds, adapts, and possibly reacts to attention. And that means whatever launched it left it with rules. And those rules might be unfolding right now in real time. Maybe one day we'll get a direct answer, maybe we won't. But one thing is certain tonight. For the first time in our history, humanity is not the only thing observing. Now we're on the scoreboard too, and that changes everything. If you want to continue this journey with me, hit subscribe and watch the next video that just popped up on your screen. I'll meet you there and we keep digging.